50 years had passed since the Galactic Consortium first arrived at Earth's doorstep. Commander Park Min-ho still remembered the history lessons about that momentous day when the sleek alien vessels had descended from the stars, bearing gifts of knowledge and friendship. The morning sky had turned dark as massive ships blocked out the sun. People across the world had stood in their streets, pointing upward at the impossible sight. Children had cried, adults had prayed. Scientists had grabbed their instruments and started recording everything. Then the ships had landed, and everything changed. The Villani had been the first to step out of their craft. They looked almost human, but their skin was pale blue, and their eyes were larger than any human's. They moved with grace and spoke in musical tones that made everyone who heard them feel calm. Behind them came the Karathi Empire representatives, tall, strong beings with gray skin and serious faces. Last came the Nexus Coalition, strange creatures that seemed to shimmer and change as they walked. All of them had one thing in common. They smiled at humans the way adults smile at small children who have done something cute. "We are here to help," the Villani ambassador Thex had declared through the translation matrix they had quickly built. His voice was gentle and kind. "Your species shows promise, but you must be patient. Advanced technologies require wisdom to wield safely." Dr. Kim Yuna, Earth's lead xenobiologist, had worked day and night in those early days to establish communication protocols with their new galactic neighbors. She had been so excited to be part of history. Her team had learned alien languages, studied their customs, and tried to understand their advanced science. "They are so much more advanced than us," she had told her colleagues. "We are like children. Compared to them, we must learn everything we can." And so humanity had waited. They had been good students, eager to please their new teachers. The aliens had brought gifts. They gave Earth fusion reactors that could power entire cities, shared medical knowledge that helped cure diseases that had plagued humanity for centuries. They provided farming techniques that could grow food in the harshest environments. To the people of Earth, it seemed like magic. But there were things the aliens did not share. They kept their antimatter technology to themselves, saying humans were not ready for such dangerous power. They gave outdated star charts to human explorers while they mapped the galaxy's true hyperspace routes in secret. When humans asked about faster-than-light travel, the aliens always said the same thing: "In time, when you are ready." Mining operations began on Luna and the asteroid belt. The aliens said it was for mutual development. They needed resources, and humans needed to learn how to work in space. It seemed like a fair trade. Human workers labored alongside alien overseers, learning new techniques and technologies. Engineer Li Zhuan had been one of those workers. He was a smart man who had built bridges and skyscrapers before the aliens came. When he looked at the mining equipment the aliens provided, something bothered him. The machines were powerful, but they seemed inefficient. They broke down often and needed constant repairs. "These designs don't make sense," he told his supervisor one day. "The power couplings are too weak for the energy output. And look at these stress points in the frame. They're positioned exactly where the most pressure would build up." His supervisor, a human named Director Yang Xiang, had frowned at him. "The aliens have been building machines for thousands of years, Juan. They know what they're doing." "But sir, I've been an engineer for 20 years. These machines are designed to fail." "That's enough," Yang had said sharply. "We must trust our benefactors. They know what's best for our development." Li Chuan had wanted to argue, but he knew it was useless. The Human Liaison Committee always sided with the aliens. They had been chosen specifically because they believed in cooperation and trust. Anyone who questioned the aliens' methods was labeled as paranoid or ungrateful. So Jaewon had kept quiet and continued working, but he had also started keeping notes, wrote down every design flaw, every efficiency problem, every time a machine failed exactly where he had predicted it would. He hid these notes in his personal files, not sure why he was saving them, but unable to throw them away. The years passed, and humanity grew comfortable in their role as the galaxy's eager students. Children grew up learning about their alien friends in school. Universities offered courses in alien languages and cultures. Earth's governments worked closely with consortium representatives to plan humanity's future among the stars. But sometimes, late at night, people like Li Guan would look up at the stars and wonder why their teachers seemed so reluctant to let them graduate. They wondered why every gift came with restrictions, why every lesson stopped just short of the important parts, they wondered, but they did not speak their doubts aloud. After all, the aliens had saved humanity from war and disease and hunger. They had brought peace and prosperity to Earth. Surely they knew what was best. The aliens had taught humanity many things over the years. It taught them to be patient, to be grateful, to be obedient. It had taught them to trust without question and to never reach too high. What the aliens had not realized was that they were also teaching humanity something else entirely. They were teaching them that their teachers were not telling them everything. And some humans, the quiet ones, who kept careful notes and asked uncomfortable questions, were beginning to understand that their teachers might not want them to succeed at all. But the aliens were not worried. Humans were just children after all, and children, they believed, would always do what they were told. They were about to learn how wrong they were, Dr. Choi. Hunsu had always been the kind of person who noticed small details. As a child, she would spot the one crooked picture on the wall or the missing button on her teacher's coat. Her mother used to joke that Hyun-soo could find a needle in a haystack just by looking at it wrong. Now, as Earth's senior technology analyst, that same attention to detail had made her one of the most respected scientists on the planet. She spent her days in the deep underground laboratories beneath New Geneva, studying every piece of alien technology that came through Earth's research facilities. The work was fascinating but exhausting. Alien blueprints were written in languages that hurt human eyes to read for too long. The technical manuals were filled with concepts that human science was still struggling to understand. But Hyun-soo loved every minute of it. She felt like she was unlocking the secrets of the universe. One equation at a time. It was a Tuesday morning when everything changed. She was doing routine maintenance on a Vellana-designed plasma conduit, one of the devices that helped power the research facility. The conduit was supposed to be a masterpiece of alien engineering, capable of channeling enormous amounts of energy with perfect efficiency. But as Hyun-soo ran her tests, something felt wrong. The numbers on her instruments didn't match what the alien manuals said they should be. The efficiency ratings were off by almost 30%. The power output was much lower than what the equations suggested it should be. At first she thought it was her fault. Maybe she had made a mistake in her calculations. Maybe the instruments were broken. Maybe she was just tired from working too many late nights. But Hyun-soo had learned long ago to trust her instincts. She ran the tests again, then again. Time, the results were the same. The plasma conduit was working far below its theoretical capacity. Maybe it's a translation error, she muttered to herself, pulling up the original alien documentation. Or maybe there's a typo in the manual. But as she dug deeper into the files, more problems emerged. The safety protocols that should have been built into the reactor designs were missing. The metallurgical specifications called for metal alloys that were deliberately weakened. The cooling systems were designed to work at temperatures that would cause them to fail after a few years of use. Hyun-soo felt a cold knot forming in her stomach. This wasn't sloppy work or translation errors. This was deliberate. Someone had taken perfectly good technology and systematically sabotaged it. She spent the next 3 days going through every piece of alien technology in the facility: fusion reactors, communication arrays, life support systems, transportation pods, everything. Had the same problems? They were all designed to work poorly, to break down, to fail when humans needed them most. Captain Song Dae-ho was the military liaison assigned to her research team. He was a serious man in his 50s who had served in 3 different wars before the aliens came. He had seen enough of the world to be suspicious of gifts that seemed too good to be true. Captain Hyun-soo called to him as he was leaving the facility one evening. "I need to show you something." She led him to her private lab and spread out the evidence she had gathered. Charts and graphs covered every surface. Computer screens showed technical specifications and performance data. The story they told was impossible to ignore. You're telling me they've been giving us broken technology for 5 decades? Daeho asked, his voice quiet but dangerous. Not broken, Hyun-soo corrected, pointing to a diagram of a power coupling. Deliberately crippled. Look at these designs. They're engineered to fail after a certain number of cycles. These structural blueprints have stress points that make no engineering sense unless you want the system to collapse. Daeho studied the evidence for a long time. He had been a soldier long enough to recognize sabotage when he saw it, but this was different. This was sabotage on a scale that was almost impossible to believe. The fusion reactors that power our cities, he said slowly. The medical equipment that saves lives in our hospitals. The communication systems that connect our colonies. All of it, Hyun-soo confirmed. Every single piece of technology they've given us has been deliberately weakened. We're not their students, Captain. We're their victims. Daeho stood silent for a long moment, processing the implications. His face was grim, and Hyun-soo could see the soldier in him calculating the consequences of what they had discovered. Need to report this immediately, he said finally the next morning. They requested an emergency meeting with the Human-Alien Relations Committee. Director Yang Seong, who had been instrumental in establishing the partnership agreements 50 years ago, agreed to see them in her office overlooking the Geneva spaceport. Yang was an elegant woman in her 70s, who had dedicated her life to building trust between humans and aliens. She had won Nobel Prizes for her work in interspecies diplomacy. She was a hero to billions of people across the Earth and its colonies. She was also completely unwilling to listen to what they had to say. This is exactly the kind of paranoid thinking that could destroy everything we've built, she warned them after they had presented their evidence. The consortium has been nothing but generous with us. They've shared their knowledge, their technology, their culture. They've helped us end war and disease and hunger. But Director Hyun-soo tried to interrupt. The evidence shows that you've been working too hard and seeing conspiracies where none exist, Yang said sharply. I won't have this facility's reputation damaged by wild theories and accusations. Yang refused to even review their data. She dismissed their concerns as the paranoid fantasies of overworked scientists. She reminded them that questioning the aliens' motives was not just wrong, it was dangerous. It could undermine the trust that had been built over decades. That night, Hyun-soo and Daeho sat in a small cafe near the research facility, staring at their untouched coffee cups. The weight of what they had discovered pressed down on them like a physical force. She's not going to help us, Daeho said finally. No, Hyun-soo agreed. She's too invested in the partnership. She can't afford to believe that it's all been a lie. Sat in silence for a few more minutes, both of them understanding that their lives had just changed forever. They had discovered a truth that the world wasn't ready to hear. They had evidence that could shake the foundations of human society. So what do we do? Daeho asked. Hyun-soo looked out the window at the alien ships landing at the spaceport. For 50 years, humans had watched those ships with wonder and gratitude. Now she saw them differently. Now she saw them as the tools of a deception so vast and patient that it had taken decades to notice. We find others, she said quietly. There have to be others who've noticed things that don't add up. Others who've asked questions and been told to stop asking. And then what? Hyun-soo turned back to look at him. And Daeho saw something in her eyes that hadn't been there before. It was determination, but it was also something else. It was the look of someone who had decided to fight back. Then we go underground, she said. We start remembering everything. The message came 3 days after their meeting with Director Yang. It was hidden inside a routine maintenance report. Just a few extra numbers that meant nothing to anyone who wasn't looking for them. Dr. Choi Hyun-soo had been looking for. Exactly this kind of thing. The numbers were coordinates. A location in the old part of Seoul in the ruins left over from the earthquake 20 years ago. There was also a time and a simple phrase, Steele remembers. Hyun-soo showed the message to Captain Song Daeho. He studied it carefully, his soldier's instincts telling him this could be a trap. But they had few choices left. No? Their official channels had been closed. Their concerns had been dismissed. If there were others who had noticed what they had noticed, they needed to find them. The meeting place was in the basement of a building that had been abandoned. Since the earthquake, the entrance was hidden behind a false wall that looked like it had been damaged in the disaster. Hyunsu and Daeho found it after 20 minutes of searching in the dark. The man who met them looked like a grandfather. He was small and thin, with gray hair and kind eyes behind thick glasses. But when he spoke, his voice carried the authority of someone who had spent decades making difficult decisions. "I'm Professor Kung Minseok," he said simply. "I have been waiting for you." He led them deeper into the building, down stairs that shouldn't have existed, through corridors that had been carved out of the rock beneath Seoul. The air was cool and dry, and the walls were lined with metal panels that reflected their flashlight beams. "How did you know we would come?" Daeho asked. "Because we know everything that happens in the research facilities," Minseok replied. "We have people everywhere. Scientists, technicians, security guards, cleaning staff. All of them watch and listen and remember." They walked for what felt like miles through the underground tunnels. Finally, they reached a massive door made of the same metal as the wall panels. Minseok placed his hand on a scanner, and the door opened with a soft hiss. What lay beyond took their breath away. The chamber was enormous, carved out of solid rock and lined with metal from floor to ceiling. But it wasn't empty. The walls were covered with thousands of metal tablets, each one about the size of a book. Each tablet was covered with tiny writing, etched deep into the metal with laser precision. "Welcome to the Steel Archives," Minseok said. Hyunsu walked closer to one of the walls and examined the tablets. The writing was in Korean, but she could also see English, Chinese, Arabic, and dozens of other languages. The text was incredibly detailed with technical diagrams, mathematical equations, and what looked like historical records. "We call ourselves the Steel Archives because we learned early on that digital records could be compromised," Minseok explained. "Computer files can be deleted, modified, or destroyed. But steel endures. Steel remembers." He led them to a section of the wall and pulled out one of the tablets. It was heavy in his hands, and the surface was covered with microscopic writing that would have been impossible to read without special equipment. "This tablet documents the first deception," he said. "The fusion reactors they gave us in 2087. Our scientists noticed immediately that the designs were flawed, but they were told to keep quiet. 3 of them disappeared. The others learned to stay silent." Daeho felt a chill run down his spine. "Disappeared? Accidents?" Minseok said quietly. "Car crashes, equipment failures, sudden illnesses. Nothing that could be traced back to the aliens, but too many coincidences to ignore." They moved to another section of the archives. Here the tablets were organized by category: technology, military, economics, politics, social control. Each section told the same story of systematic deception and manipulation. "Captain Lim Gangwa was one of our early recruits," Minseok continued, pointing to a tablet covered with military specifications. "She was formerly of the Earth's Defense Force, before it was disbanded and replaced with the Consortium Security Service. She discovered that the defensive systems provided by the Korathi had built-in vulnerabilities." A woman emerged from the shadows at the far end of the chamber. She was tall and strong, with the bearing of a career soldier. Her hair was streaked with gray, but her eyes were sharp and alert. "Every shield generator, every weapon system they've given us," she said as she approached, "all of it designed to fail when we need it most. The power cores have hidden shutdown codes. The targeting systems have blind spots. The armor plating has weak points that aren't in any of the official specifications." Hyunsu stared at the woman, then at the thousands of tablets surrounding them. "How long has this been going on?" "We started documenting the deceptions 37 years ago," Minseok replied. "But the deceptions themselves began the day that aliens arrived. We just didn't notice at first." "How many people know about this?" Daeho asked. Minseok smiled, but it wasn't a happy expression.
"More than you might think."
"The network has grown slowly, carefully. We recruit people who have seen too much, who have asked too many questions, who have been told to stop thinking. led them to a central console where a map of the solar system was displayed. Tiny lights marked locations across Earth, Luna, Mars, and the outer colonies. There were hundreds of them, maybe thousands. Dr. Bae Sun-hee operates from a facility on Mars, Min-seok explained. She has reverse-engineered true alien technology from salvaged wreckage. She's learned things the aliens never intended us to. No. Engineer Otaeon has hidden manufacturing facilities in the asteroid belt, Lim added. He's been building equipment using principles the aliens thought they'd successfully concealed from us. How many of us are there? Won-soo asked. Still staring at the map? Across all the colonies and stations? Nearly 50,000, Min-seok replied. Scientists, engineers, military personnel, miners, technicians, teachers, doctors, farmers. All of us united by one simple truth. We remember everything. The archives contained more than just technical specifications. As they explored deeper, Hyun-soo and Daeho found tablets documenting every broken promise, every condescending comment, every instance where humanity had been treated as lesser beings. There were records of meetings where alien representatives had laughed at human naivety. There were transcripts of conversations where they had discussed humans like livestock to be managed. The aliens made one critical error in their assessment of humanity, Min-seok said, as they stood before a wall covered with these social and political records. They underestimated the human capacity for patient, methodical memory. They thought we were like other species they had encountered, Lim added. Grateful for their gifts, content to remain in our assigned place. Too primitive to understand what was really happening to us. But humans are different, Hyun-soo said, beginning to understand. Yes, Min-seok nodded. Humans remember grudges. Humans hold on to pain. Humans can wait decades for the right moment to act. The aliens saw these traits as weaknesses, as signs of our primitive nature. They never realized these traits would become their downfall. As they walked through the archives, Hyun-soo began to understand the scope of what she had stumbled into. This wasn't just a group of paranoid scientists. This was a carefully organized resistance movement that had been preparing for decades. They had been watching, learning, and planning, while the rest of humanity lived in blissful ignorance. What happens now? Daeho asked. Min-seok looked at them both, measuring their commitment. Now you become part of the Steel Archives. You document everything you've learned. You'll help us prepare for the day when the truth can no longer be hidden. When will that be? Hyun-soo asked. Soon, Lim replied, her voice carrying the certainty of someone who had spent years preparing for war. Very soon, aliens had taught humanity many things over the past 50 years. They had taught them to be patient, to be grateful, to be obedient. But they had also taught them something else, something they had never intended. They had taught humanity to remember. The broadcast came on a Tuesday morning, interrupting every communication channel across the solar system. Dr. Choi Hyun-soo was in her laboratory when the screens flickered and Ambassador Thex's familiar blue face appeared. His large eyes filled with what seemed like genuine concern. Citizens of Earth and the colonies, he began, his musical voice carrying its usual tone of gentle authority. I come to you with urgent news that will affect every human life. Hyun-soo stopped her work and watched, along with billions of other humans across the solar system. In the weeks since joining the Steel Archives, she had learned to listen to alien announcements with different ears. She heard the careful word choices, the emotional manipulation, the lies wrapped in caring concern. The consortium has discovered a grave threat approaching the Sol system, Thex continued. An unnamed enemy that seeks to destroy everything in its path. Our deep space monitoring stations have detected a massive fleet of unknown vessels heading directly toward Earth. The image behind Thex changed to show what appeared to be sensor readings and star charts. Red dots moved across the display, approaching the solar system from the direction of the galactic core. This enemy has already destroyed 3 star systems, Thex said, his voice heavy with sadness. Billions of lives have been lost. Entire civilizations have been wiped out. We cannot allow this to happen to our human friends. Hyun-soo felt her stomach tighten. She had learned enough about alien technology to know that the sensor readings looked real, but something about the whole presentation felt wrong. The timing was too convenient, the threat too perfectly positioned to justify what came next. For your protection, Dex announced, we have prepared new worlds in the Kepler 442 system. These planets have been specially selected for human settlement. They have the right atmosphere, the right temperature, the right resources for your species to thrive. The display changed again, showing beautiful images of green worlds with blue oceans and white clouds. It looked like Earth, but somehow more perfect, more inviting. All human populations must be relocated within 6 months, Dex said. Sol system will be evacuated and quarantined. We'll establish a defensive perimeter to protect the galaxy from this terrible threat. Yunsu turned off the broadcast and immediately contacted Professor Kong Minseok through the Steel Archives, secure communication system. Within hours, an emergency council was called in the underground chambers beneath Sol. The mood in the chamber was tense. Representatives from across the solar system appeared on secure screens, their faces grim. These were the leaders of the Steel Archives, the people who had been documenting alien deceptions for decades. Dr. Yuji-Ho has something to report, Minseok said, gesturing to a thin woman with intense eyes who was sitting at a bank of communication equipment. Ji-Ho was the archive's lead linguist, one of the few humans who had managed to crack alien encryption protocols. She had been monitoring consortium communications for years, slowly building a picture of what the aliens really thought about humanity. There is no approaching threat, she said without preamble. I've been listening to their private communications. For the past week, the sensor readings in the broadcast are fabricated. The images of destroyed star systems are computer simulations. A murmur of anger rippled through the assembled leaders. They had expected this, but hearing it confirmed still stung. What are they really planning? Asked Captain Lim Gingwa. Gi-Ho pulled up a new display showing intercepts from alien military. Communications. They're calling it the final harvest. Complete resource extraction of all rocky planets and moons in the Sol system. They estimate the operation will take 200 years. The room fell silent. Everyone understood what this meant. The aliens had been slowly preparing for this moment for 50 years, weakening humanity's defenses, limiting their technology, making them dependent on consortium support. Now they were ready to take everything. They've been planning this from the beginning, said Dr. Bae Sunhee, appearing on screen from her facility on Mars. Every gift, every kindness, every moment of seeming friendship, it was all to soften us up for this moment. The Kepler 442 system is a trap, Ji-Ho continued. The planets are real, but they're resource poor and isolated. Once we're relocated there, we'll be completely dependent on the consortium for everything. We'll be prisoners pretending to be colonists. Captain Park Sun-woo, now commander of the Hidden Fleet, stood up from his seat. Was a man in his 40s, who had been recruited into the Steel Archives after discovering that the navigation systems on Earth Defense Force ships had been programmed with false star charts. Then it's time, he said simply. Those 3 words carried the weight of decades of preparation. Across the solar system, hidden facilities that had been dormant for years suddenly came online. Shipyards concealed in asteroid hollows revealed, vessels that had been built in secret using technology reverse-engineered from alien wreckage. Factories buried deep in planetary crusts began producing weapons and defensive systems using principles the aliens thought they had successfully concealed. Human fleet that emerged from concealment was unlike anything the galaxy had seen. Ships that looked like they belonged in alien fleets, but built with human determination and powered by human anger. They had been hidden for decades, waiting for this moment. Admiral Seo Hiron took command of the flagship Remembrance, a massive vessel that had been constructed inside a hollowed-out asteroid. The ship's hull was covered with metal plates that bore the names of every human who had died in suspicious accidents over the past 50 years. Every scientist who had asked too many questions, every engineer who had noticed design flaws, every military officer who had questioned alien motives as the human fleet moved into position around Earth. The consortium vessels orbiting the planet suddenly found themselves surrounded by ships that shouldn't exist. The alien sensors were registering technology that was supposed to be beyond human capabilities. Ambassador Thex, Admiral Hiron said, opening communications with the consortium flagship. Her voice carried across the void, clear and strong. We need to talk. The response came after several minutes of silence. When Thex finally appeared on screen, his usual composure was shattered. His large eyes were wide with shock, and his blue skin seemed to have grown pale. "How is this possible?" he demanded. "Your species lacks the technology to build such vessels. You don't have the knowledge to create these weapons." "We learn from the best teachers," Hiron replied, her voice carrying a cold satisfaction. "We just didn't learn what you thought you were teaching us." The alien fleet began to move, taking defensive positions. But they were no longer dealing with the helpless humans they had manipulated for 50 years. They were facing a species that had been watching, learning, and preparing for this exact moment. "You taught us to be patient," Hiron continued. "You taught us to be grateful. You taught us to remember our place. No. But you forgot something important about humans, Ambassador. We remember everything, and we never forgive." The Steel Archives had been preparing for this day for decades. They had documented every lie, reverse-engineered every piece of technology, built a fleet that could challenge the aliens on equal terms. The time for deception was over. The time for truth had begun. The confrontation that followed was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. When the alien fleet found themselves surrounded by impossible human ships, they prepared for battle. Their weapons charged, their shields activated. Their commanders issued orders for what they expected to be a swift victory over the primitive humans who had somehow stolen advanced technology, but the attack never came. Instead, humanity did something that shocked the aliens more than any weapon could have. They began to build. Across the solar system, massive construction ships emerged from hidden facilities. These weren't warships or defensive platforms. They were something entirely different.
Oh, I see.
The aliens watched in confusion as the human vessels began assembling enormous structures in the space around Earth, Mars, Jupiter, and the outer colonies. Engineer Nam Jun-ho had been working on the plans for months. He stood on the bridge of the construction ship Memory, watching as his crews put together the most important project of his life. The structure taking shape outside Earth was massive, a perfect geometric form that could be seen from orbit with the naked eye. "How long until it's finished?" asked Admiral Seo Hiron, who had come aboard to observe the construction. 6 hours, Junho replied. "The other monuments will be completed at the same time." The alien fleet maintained a respectful distance, their commanders unsure of what they were witnessing. Ambassador Vex opened communications with the human flagship. "What are you building?" he demanded. "Monuments, Admiral," Hiron replied simply. "Monuments to truth." As the hours passed, the structures began to take their final form. Each monument. It was a perfect geometric shape, made from polished steel that reflected the light of the sun. But it was the surface of each monument that made the aliens truly understand what they were seeing. The steel was covered in writing. It's not painted or printed, but carved deep into the metal with laser precision. The text was tiny, but perfectly readable, rendered in dozens of languages, both human and alien. And there was so much of it that it covered every inch of the monument's surface. The monument above Earth was the first to be completed. As the construction ships moved away, the aliens could see the full scope of what humanity had created. The structure was enormous, visible from anywhere in Earth's orbital space, and every square meter of its surface was covered with text. "Monument 1 documents your technological deceptions," Admiral Hiron announced to the alien fleet. "Every design flaw you deliberately built into our equipment, every safety protocol you removed, every efficiency rating you falsified, it's all here, carved in steel that will last for millennia." The alien sensor readings confirmed what their eyes were seeing. The monument contained millions of lines of text, all of it detailing specific instances of technological sabotage, technical specifications, performance comparisons, failure analysis, everything humanity had discovered about the aliens' deliberate deceptions. "Monument 2 chronicles your resource theft," Hiron continued, as the structure near Mars was completed. "Every ton of ore taken from our asteroid belt, every cubic meter of water extracted from our moon, every resource removed from our system under false pretenses, we counted it all." The monument near Jupiter was next. Monument 3 lists every condescending statement your representatives made about human capabilities. Every time you called us primitive, Every time you laughed at our intelligence. Every time you treated us like children who couldn't understand the adult world. Similar monuments appeared throughout the solar system. Each one was a perfect geometric structure, their surfaces covered in the same precise engravings. The aliens realized they were looking at a complete record of 50 years of deception, carved permanently into steel that would endure long after everyone involved was dead. Dr. Shin. Yuna had been chosen as humanity's chief negotiator. She was a diplomat who had spent years studying alien cultures, learning their languages, understanding their psychology. She had also been documenting their lies for the Steel Archives. "We don't want war," she said, addressing the assembled alien fleet. "We want recognition. You treated us as children to be managed, resources to be harvested, fools to be deceived." But we remembered everything. The monuments were not weapons, but they were more terrifying to the aliens than any military threat. They were proof that humanity had been watching, learning, and documenting everything for decades. They were evidence that the aliens' careful deceptions had been seen through and catalogued with perfect accuracy. The psychological impact was immediate. The Villani, Korathi, and Nexus representatives requested an emergency session. For the first time in galactic history, humanity was invited to join the consortium as an equal member, not a junior partner. The negotiations took place aboard a neutral station in the space between Earth and Mars. The alien delegates looked nervous, unsure of how to deal with a species that had so thoroughly documented their deceptions. They had never encountered anything like this before. Why, Ambassador Thex asked during the negotiations? His musical voice had lost its usual confidence. Why didn't you simply revolt? Why didn't you attack us when you discovered our deception? Captain Kim Do-yen, one of the Steel Archives founders, answered for humanity. He was an old man now, gray-haired and weathered, but his eyes were sharp with intelligence. "'Cause we knew something you didn't," he said. "We knew that true strength isn't about who has the biggest weapons or the most advanced technology. It's about who remembers the longest and learns the most." The aliens had never understood this aspect of human nature. They had seen humanity's tendency to hold grudges as a primitive weakness. They had viewed human memory as a flaw that prevented the species from moving forward. They had never realized that these traits could be turned into tools of resistance. "You taught us to be patient," Do-yen continued. "You taught us to watch and learn. You taught us to remember our place. But you never understood that humans don't forget. We carry our grievances like treasures. We polish them and preserve them and pass them down to our children. The monuments would stand forever, a reminder to the galaxy that humanity had not forgotten, had not forgiven, but had chosen to carve their grievances in steel rather than blood. They were not weapons of war, but they were something far more powerful. Weapons of truth that could not be destroyed or denied. And in the depths of space, on every monument's base, a simple message was repeated in every known language. We remember. We endure. We are steel. The galaxy would never underestimate humanity again. The species that had been dismissed as primitive children had proven they were something far more dangerous. They were the species that never forgot.